From the moment I entered the gates of the Obasanjo family compound, I knew I didn't belong. Not because of poverty, not because of class, but because I was not her. Aminat, the name that clung to every wall in that mansion like the scent of old perfume, lingering, unwanted, unforgettable. I married turned Obasanjo, a successful civil engineer from Ibadan, out of love. Pure, passionate, foolish love. We met at a conference in Abuja, and within 6 months he proposed. His charm, his smile, his promises of forever. I believed them all. But marriage, I quickly learned, was not just to a man. It was to a family. And his family never truly accepted me. The problems began even before we exchanged vows. Tan's mother, Mama Obasanjo, never hid her disappointment. "You are not the woman I prayed for," she said with narrowed eyes and tight lips the day I first visited. I laughed it off then, thinking she'd come around with time. She didn't. On the day we moved into the family compound, a sprawling estate where tradition reigned supreme, I was shocked to discover that the main bedroom I was supposed to share with Tand had been taken. "By who?" I asked. Mama said coldly, Aminat needed a place to stay. "It's still her room." I froze. "You let your son's ex-fiancé move into our home?" I asked Tan that night, barely containing my anger. "She had nowhere to go," he whispered, avoiding my eyes. "She's like family. Just for a while." That was the night something inside me cracked. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply moved into the dusty guest house at the edge of the compound. A tiny 2-room structure meant for staff. The walls were moldy, the floor cracked, and the ceiling leaked during rain. But it was mine. I scrubbed it clean, slept on a mattress on the floor, and cooked with a small kerosene stove. I greeted Mama each morning, smiled through Aminat's smug glances, and watched as Tan quietly avoided confrontation. Every day was humiliation wrapped in silence. The family treated me like an outsider. I was not allowed to help with family decisions. They gave me smaller portions of food. Mama refused to let me host guests in the main house. Tand became distant, as though the disapproval of his family erased his love for me. But while they sneered and ignored me, I began to rebuild myself, brick by brick. I sold some of the jewelry from our wedding and bought paint, tiles, and second-hand furniture from local markets. At night, I watched YouTube tutorials on DIY renovation. I learned to plaster walls, fix plumbing, and install electrical fixtures. I worked in silence, my fingers bruised, but my pride intact. It took months. The compound watched with growing curiosity as the guest house transformed. I installed flower beds, hung curtains, laid fresh tiles in the bathroom, and mounted solar panels on the roof. I turned the neglected space into a cozy haven, with rich curtains, hand-woven rugs, warm lighting, and a kitchen that gleamed. Eventually, people started to notice. One day, Mama came to the door. "You did this all by yourself?" she asked, stepping inside hesitantly. I smiled. "Yes, Ma. I wanted to feel at home." She said nothing, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Was it surprise? Envy? Soon, Tan's cousins and aunts began visiting more frequently, not to the main house, but to mine. They complimented my taste, asked for recipes, and whispered that my small space felt more peaceful than the mansion. But peace, I knew, doesn't last in a house built on lies. One Friday evening, I came home from the market and found Aminat sitting in my living room, legs crossed, sipping tea she clearly helped herself to. "You've done well for yourself," she said with a mocking grin. "It's cute, like a dollhouse." I placed the groceries down, eyes calm. "What do you want, Aminat?" She looked around, then shrugged. "I just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Your husband spends more time here now than with me." Something in me twisted. My husband. I asked, slowly. Oh, don't play dumb, she said. You think he stayed quiet for nothing? He still talks to me, still confides in me. You're just the wife. I'm the heart. That night, I confronted Tand. Are you still in love with her? I asked. He looked away. Silence. That was my answer. And yet, I didn't leave. Because I was building something bigger than a marriage. The next week, I applied for a home renovation reality show in Lagos, Transform Niger, that spotlighted small spaces turned into dream homes. I sent pictures of the guest house and told them my story. They called within days. Filming started 2 weeks later. Cameras rolled as I narrated how I'd turned my insult into inspiration. The crew was amazed. They captured every corner, from the handmade wall art to the bookshelf carved from discarded wood. The episode aired to massive viewership. Suddenly, brands reached out. I was offered a sponsorship to launch a YouTube channel. People messaged me saying I'd inspired them to rise above their circumstances. One NGO even partnered with me to create affordable, dignified housing in rural areas. Mama watched in disbelief as people knocked on my gate not to see her mansion, but to see my palace. Tand came to me one night, remorse on his face. You're incredible, Zainab, he said. Let's start over. I looked at him, a heart heavy but clear. You didn't stand up for me when I needed you. I won't make space for someone who couldn't make space for me. He stared, speechless. I smiled gently and closed the door behind him. Months passed. I filed for divorce. The compound buzzed with gossip. Mama begged me to reconsider. Tand pleaded. Even Aminat disappeared quietly, unable to compete with a woman who had turned disgrace into dignity. I bought a small piece of land outside Ibadan and started building homes for women who had been abandoned, ignored, or shamed by family. We called it House of Heroines. I didn't just build rooms, I built sanctuaries. One day, during an event, a teenage girl came up to me and asked, "How did you stay strong?" I smiled and said, "Because I remembered who I was, even when everyone else forgot." She nodded slowly, eyes wide. One day, I want to be like you. And that was all I ever needed. Sometimes, when they try to bury you in shame, all they do is plant a seed. And when that seed grows, it becomes a tree so tall, they can't ignore its shadow. Never let anyone decide your worth. If they give your place to someone else, build something greater for yourself. Not out of spite, but out of power. The news of my guest house makeover spread beyond the compound. What had once been whispered mockery turned into admiration, even envy. Mama began referring to it as the small house, careful not to acknowledge it as mine. But the visitors, the conversations, the attention, it all centered around me now. A local women's association invited me to speak at their monthly meeting. At first, I hesitated. Who was I to give a speech? But something in me knew this was a moment of purpose. I stood before them, a woman once humiliated and cast aside, now praised for resilience and grace. I told them the truth. That I had once begged for love. That I cried alone in a leaking room while my husband laughed in the main house. That I didn't build a palace because I had power, I built it because I had no other choice. After my talk, the journalist reached out to feature my story in a national magazine. A few weeks later, the television crew from Lagos arrived to film a segment on my journey. I wore a simple blue dress, my natural hair in a crown of coils, and I spoke calmly, clearly, without bitterness. Tand started to change. He came around more often. He brought small gifts, made excuses to visit. One evening, he showed up with his suitcase. "I can't live in that house anymore," he said. "It's empty." I looked at him. It was never the house that was empty. He blinked. I know I failed you. But I want to make things right. A part of me still loved him, but it was a small part now, buried beneath months of silence, neglect, and abandonment. He had watched me suffer in silence and did nothing. I let him sleep in the guest house for a few days. But with each passing hour, it became clearer he wanted to return to the woman I had become, not support the woman I had been becoming. So I gave him a decision. You can stay here for 1 week, I told him. During that time, I need you to do something you've never done, speak for me. Tell your mother, your family, what they did to me. Not just as a formality, but as truth. He didn't answer right away. But that night, I overheard him on the phone, speaking with Mama. No, Ma. She's not going back to the main house. She's not the outsider. You made her one. For the first time, I heard Tan's voice not as my husband, but as my defender. But it was too late. The day I handed Tan the divorce papers, he stood frozen. I thought we were fixing things, he said, voice shaking. I looked at him, I really looked. This was the man I once believed would fight for me, who instead watched silently as his family handed my dignity to another woman. You only began to defend me when the world did, I said softly. When I was broken, you stayed quiet. Now that I'm whole, you want to return. But I'm not building a new life for you to move back into. I built it for me. He said nothing. He just sat down, a head in his hands. A week later, I moved out of the compound. The guest house that once served as my refuge now stood empty, a symbol of survival that no longer needed to prove itself. I rented a small apartment in town and continued growing House of Heroines, the women's housing project I'd started. Each unit we built was named after a woman who had reclaimed her dignity, the Zainab, the Inyola, the Mariam. Women from all over Nigeria came forward with stories of betrayal, neglect, abandonment. And in each of them, I saw a reflection of my former self, wounded but capable of rising. Months passed. I received an invitation to an awards gala in Lagos, the Phoenix Women Honors. I was nominated for Resilience Advocate of the Year. As I stood on that glittering stage, clutching a glass trophy, the lights on me, cameras flashing, I thought about the moment Mama told me I didn't belong in the family. They gave my room to his ex. They erased me before I had even fully arrived. And yet, here I was. After the event, I returned home and sat in my quiet apartment, looking at the photo of my guest house palace framed above the mantel. Not out of pride, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the rejection you think will destroy you is actually the fire that will refine you. When people try to humiliate you, don't let them shape you, let them spark you. It's easy to be silent when you're loved. But the real test of character is how people treat you when you're low. If they give your place to someone else, don't beg to be let back in. Build your own place. Make it so beautiful that they regret ever closing the door. You don't need their seat at the table. You can build your own table. And trust me, those who once looked down on you, one day, they'll ask for a seat at yours.